I'm John Snoddy. I'm currently CEO of a new game company called Operative Games.
A little closer to your mouth.
All right, can you hear me? Yeah, they can hear me as much as they want to.
Can we close these doors, Garrett?
We do. We're an AI kind of enabled company. We build games that are based on AI characters. So it's all about storytelling. We start with real human writers. We use screenwriters typically to create character personalities and stories that show off those personalities. And then we realize those as AI characters, allow you to jump into a world with those characters, and a story unfolds as you go. We'll stop there.
Real quick, if it does get hot in here, we'll open those. It's just that everyone's kind of milling around between talks. It's still in their between talk mode right now. So when it does get hot in here, we'll open the doors up again. Hopefully it'll be quieter out there. Or I'll yell at people. That's fine too. So Ben, go on with you.
I am Ben Qualo, founder CEO of Midwest Games. We are a publisher based in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the publishing hub of the world. I came out and essentially created Midwest Games after I left Netflix to try to challenge where games come from, to better support developers in other places. And part of that journey led to thinking about the models within publishing and how we can better support developers in the new way of supporting developers, what they need in the moment. So we coined the term shadow publishing, which is essentially a for-hire service with publishing, allowing developers to keep their rev share and IP rights and pay an upfront fee for publishing services that give them a better chance in market.
For people that are just coming in, there's a couple of seats down front here.
Yeah, there's a couple seats down here if anybody's not seated who would like to be seated. It's okay. It's all fairly fluid here. Feel free to come and go as you please. By which I mean, don't leave this room. No. So I guess we'll start off with the big question, which is the elephant in the room, which is what is the problem with publishing? And I mean, Ben, if you want to go first, I have a feeling you have a lot to say on the topic.
I have a couple things to say on the topic. So I think we first have to start with, well, where did publishing come from? What was the purpose of publishing? What did it used to own? What has changed? And if we think back at what publishing really did at its essence, essentially it owned the channels. It quite literally was your ability to get a game on a store shelf was via publisher, and the relationships and the ability to get that premium spot, that end cap, anything in this physical world that we used to live in games. And the problem is it's all changed. If you look even, as a transition through the eras of going from arcade to console to a more digital world to the future cloud world and other interesting things, which he'll talk more to, it's just completely changed. And the ease of which that people can put out games has changed, the volume of content that's come out. But the platforms, especially digitally, have not changed a lot. And so the whole space has just flipped. And then VC coming into the space has completely changed things as well, because suddenly the place where you went to get the funding that you needed has flopped, and the publishers haven't come back to this early investment space. And I don't think they ever are coming back to this early investment space. It's just way too risky these days. So everything across the ecosystem has changed, and the publishing models have not. They have not flexed. As development has changed and flexed, and co-dev and smaller development groups, publishing has largely not changed. And that's I think the larger problem is, what are we going to do to change this really important function that exists to actually better support developers?
John, I think you have a better idea than most anyone here of just how much has changed in the last few years. So do you have a comment on what is the problem with game publishing?
We were talking earlier about, remember the internet before Google. It was just, first it was a few websites, then it was lots of websites, and it was just an overwhelming number of websites. And it was kind of a mess, and people were starting to develop apps to allow you to sort of, I don't know, kind of somehow put your favorites somewhere. And, you know, Channel 1 was going to be your your movie review channel, and Channel 2 would be your your movie rental channel, and you might have 10 of those. And because, you know, sort of coming from a broadcast world where there were a few channels, and people were trying to make sense of all of that, and then there was a million websites, and then there was 100 million websites, and Google kind of dealt with that and said, I got this. I've seen all the websites in the last week. Just tell me what you want. I'll go find it for you. And I think that people are already feeling overwhelmed with what's the number of titles we're expecting this year on Steam.
I mean, I think 25,000 is
That's a big number. It's a pretty big
not
number.
unrealistic.
But nothing like the number of or the number of, we'll call it number of channels on YouTube or TikTok or anything else. It's we haven't seen an overwhelming number of games like we're going to, as it just becomes easier and easier and easier to create games. And like with everything, most of what's created is not particularly good, but somehow in that haystack there's a few needles, and so you need some way to dig through all those games. And I can't help but think that at some point pretty soon there's going to be an AI that says, I've actually played all 25,000 games that are on Steam this year, plus all that were ever played, and I'm getting to know you pretty well, and I have a few that I think you might like. And I think, like Google sort of brought order to all of that chaos, we're going to see that. But then it sort of comes back to the question of publishers, and what's their part in that? What if I got them, now what are they doing for me? And so looking forward to seeing how, and talking some more about just how that evolution is going to take place to take advantage of the fact that the world's changing so profoundly.
Well, and part of what you're talking about is the curation piece of things. And what we don't have in games right now is the platforms are not curation for the player. They are curation for the platform and the publishers to make as much money as they possibly can off of the player. But that actually hurts the player experience. Like me coming from Netflix and seeing the systems that they built, and how, it doesn't matter if it's a Martin Scorsese film or a rom-com. If the user, despite Netflix spending an incredible amount of money on one piece of content and not much on the other, it matters what the user wants. And what we don't have is a platform that allows us to serve to the consumer what they actually want to be playing. And so instead you get served what is going to make the platform and the publishers, the more legacy publishers, the most amount of money. And it tends to be the games that we all know, we've known for a long time. And that's why you get to the place where, 60% of games are 5 years or older that people are playing, because we're just in this loop and the platforms are not helping us solve it. And we have to figure out a way outside of it to go direct to the consumers. And legally, some things are changing that will help with that, but we're kind of in the midst of that chaos moment.
So previously, a great publisher could get me an end cap at Walmart, so I could sell my game there and get noticed. And that audience, at least they knew that audience well enough to say, I can get you in front of that audience, or Target, or a particular publication. But my game, you can get into my game. I can just give you a phone number, and you can call a character, and that character will introduce you to the story and sort of say, come on with me, and you're off and running with no downloads or anything. And so I don't know what I would do with an end cap at Walmart. I'm not even sure if I even know what an end cap at Walmart is. And so looking forward to, like I said, the publishers evolving to the point, because what we need from a publisher is, I want 5 million trial users. I want 10 million trial users. Go get me those, and we kind of can do the rest. Or I need relationships with all of the with the influencers that probably would enjoy playing the game and would understand what it is. And so what does a publisher? How do they fit into that ecosystem? How are they enabling that for me as a developer, and in most cases, not much. You know, it's not a world that they're really connected to very deeply.
Yeah, Ben, I'm actually curious to hear what you have to say in response to that about basically what is the publisher's role in all this compared to what it used to be, because here we're talking about end caps at Walmart, and I don't know if it makes those of us who remember what those are, remember what that is, and when's the last time we bought a physical video game at Walmart. So how much, what do you think is the changing role of the publisher in the sort of like the sort of game landscape that John is talking about?
Yeah, well, publishers still always win. They are. If you look at the data, and it's hard to really splice because Steam's data lists even a self-publishing developer as an indie publisher at the lowest level. But if you kind of like can splice it out a little bit, it's less than 2% of games have a publisher. And of just initial units sold, it's between like 67 and 78% of initial units sold revenue goes to that less than 2%. And if you imagine that we don't have all the numbers around microtransactions and everything in game, publishers use those tools at much higher levels than indie developers do. And so you can imagine that means that we're getting probably near 90% or above of revenue that is going to the less than 2%. So they have it figured out in a way. Now, the problem with what is happening right now is they have it figured out in the old way of doing things. So they continue to do that. Whereas somebody like John comes along and everything in the system, the game that he's building, does not match anything that he can compare to. So they're looking at, okay, this game, you know, isn't going to be on Xbox, isn't going to be on PlayStation. I don't know how to get the numbers around that from a comparison standpoint. So how do I evaluate and then fund, and then what channels do I go through if I don't have those platforms? Because a lot of the advantages a publisher has is we have relationships. We, like, even the ones, you know, Steam and others that will claim, hey, they don't get any advantage. They do. And you have an account rep. And even just having an account rep means that you get answered on something versus no answer on it when something goes wrong. And let me tell you, if you've ever gone through the certification process or done any release management, you know that something goes wrong at all times when you're trying to put out a game. And just being able to have someone to go to is an advantage. And they have many advantages. And they have a legacy of even just email lists. Like, it seems very basic, but talk about being able to go direct to consumer. Now, a lot of people like unsubscribe and get sick of it, but still, you know, I'm subscribed to 2K because I worked for 2K for a long time. Whenever that 2K logo pops up in my email, like, I'm not unsubscribing from it, but it makes me think, and it's repetitive. And so they ultimately still have levers that just are working at a worse and worse and worse percentage over time, and so it's becoming really inefficient with what they're doing. All of their calculations are based off of an environment where there wasn't, you know, 19,000, potentially 25,000 games coming out on Steam, and so they're not used to the speed, and they're giant ships that can't move very fast. But again, those giant ships still have a huge advantage, and they're still making an incredible amount of the revenue, and they have a lot more leash than a small developer who might have one chance if they can even get their game out. And that's, you know, ultimately those things are what still bring value. Now, they're not going to problem solve this kind of situation, which means this kind of game has to figure out a way to do it themselves. And self-publishing is while you're able to do it, statistically not a viable route. You're essentially taking a lottery ticket after you work years and years on a game, and it might succeed, but it probably won't.
You know, for us, what we really want is a publisher with a, you know, that's very strategic, that sort of thinks outside the box. That's not saying, here's the media spend, here's the the retailers we're going to go to that doesn't try to sort of fit that org chart, fit what we're doing into that. Because I don't think it's going to be, I don't think that this game will respond to that very well. But like I said, it's super easy to get into the game. Like I said, I can literally give you a phone number, and you call that phone number, and you're talking to what sounds like a person, and from there you're in the story, and that draws you into the game, and you just go from there. And so because it is, I think it'll respond really well to guerrilla marketing. It'll respond to all sorts of alternative forms. We have AI characters that are smart enough that an influencer can interview them on their channel, can just literally, just like you would interview Brad Pitt or whomever you want, you can interview them and talk to them, and they'll tell you what's going on in their lives. And so I think that I don't think it's going to be all that hard to market what we're doing, but somebody who knows what they're doing has to engage and step up. And one of the things I'm curious about is influencers are, I think, becoming more and more important in how we market things. Having somebody that you sort of trust, whether you should or not, but that you sort of trust, kind of given the game or whatever it is that you're buying a bit of a nudge. A lot of those folks have agents now and are connected to big agencies and things. And I wonder if agencies will become kind of a new kind of publisher at some point, if that's in the future.
Well, I mean, we know that there are a couple publishers that are run by influencers. Big Mode, actually, another Wisconsin publisher, run by Video Game Donkey. There's OFK.
Play Animal Well. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, Play Animal. Yep. So absolutely, it's happening. I think what they're finding is they're essentially marketing agencies at that point. They're not a full-scale publisher. And even like taking a step back, I think there's a lack of understanding of what a publisher actually is. I've talked to folks that have worked in the industry a long time on the development end, and then didn't realize there's certain aspects of things that are in the publishing realm. A publisher is working on your release management, your QA, your LOC, your certification, your age ratings, or providing go-to-market strategy, or providing market evaluations, or doing user testing, or doing marketing, community, PR, and figuring out your influencer strategy, figuring out all of these layers of things that people don't consider. Sometimes a lot of indie devs will think that a publisher is just a marketing agency. And yeah, significant, important piece of the overall, but if you can't get your game released, your marketing efforts are worth nothing. And so you have to think about everything that goes into it and why that brings value to be able to essentially understand, what a publisher is, why we need publishers that are going to better support the current realm of development, because otherwise we're going to be kind of screwed in the industry, because we just are going to be dragged back by the legacy publishers that exist today that are not trying to progress forward. They're trying to keep everything the same. They're not trying to support developers that are getting different sizes than they're used to, smaller budgets. They're trying to force that for some of them, but it's all off of a legacy system that no longer works for the most part, and needs a drastic overhaul. And so we have to be flexible in how we serve developers, and realize that publishing is a support function. It's not the centerpiece of the gaming universe. And I think too many publishers think they're the centerpiece, when really the game developers and the games are the centerpiece, and we supply really important support.
I'm curious, since you say that there is a need for, I'm going to ask this question, then go run out and get a glass of water while these gentlemen talk. I'm curious what you think, and I'll start with you, John, because I think, because I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this, what the big disruptor will be in the publishing field, or just the games industry in general, that will facilitate this sort of change with publishers, but in the relationship between publishers and developers.
I think that for a little while, games that rely heavily on AI are going to
Talk amongst yourselves.
pretty bad when the moderator walks out. It's not that bad, is it?
Somebody's fetching me water. Never
Oh,
mind.
all right, there you go. You have people for that.
I have people for that.
Let's see. Oh, so games, and this will kind of go down over time, but for the moment, there's substantial costs in delivering, these agents that are actors and you can do amazing ones, but it's not free, and it scales very much with usage and number of users and the amount of time they spend hanging out with these characters, and I'm wondering what you have the obvious ones like Amazon and Microsoft with AWS and Azure, but others that have unique access to the things that one needs to run to run the servers to deliver all that. And I wonder how I'm good, thanks. I wonder how that's going to play out, in terms of publishers. Does that mean that Microsoft's role as a publisher is going to change and start to include some of those services? Because one would think they could provide those services at a much lower cost than anybody else could. And same thing with Amazon, and there are a bunch of other companies that are like that.
Yeah, I mean, I just see a future world where some publishers are getting way more specialized, not even just from genre, but from technical needs of a game, and really becoming efficient with the delivery of that game out into the market. I think part of the thing here is that we are incredibly inefficient at how we operate as an industry. I was fortunate to work in films for a number of years at Netflix and see how the films industry operates. And I look at the fact that, well, games is young in comparison to every other entertainment industry. We are, going through our teen ages and trying to figure stuff out. But we have not figured out the models of how these things are supposed to work. A publisher's role seems more so should be a facilitator or broker to get the right thing for the right group over time, and I just don't. I don't think we're thinking about it the right way or with the right ingredients bringing together. Think about a film production company that works as a filmmaker, brings in financiers and brings in other groups around that to enable it moving forward. What is the version of that in games? It's not going to be the same, but I think going back to it's ultimately, I see some focusing in on certain things, genre-wise, like somebody like Hooded Horse has figured out that strategy tactics, like go after that market, and continue to deliver on that and set expectations. But I think some of it is just going to be from a service layer of providing what certain developers need. And I look at like a company like Wolfjaw Studios, which does back-end development, and they really specialized. We need that kind of service on the publishing layer as well, thinking about how we support similar types of games.
Well, without question, AI is enabling. It's just making it easier and easier, and I think that's just beginning. We're gonna see that accelerate, and we're gonna see a whole kind of new marketplace open up that shortly is going to be a great spot for the publishers that figure that out.
So to pivot slightly, I notice that we kind of started by talking about the relationship between developers and publishers, but I'm kind of wondering now, is it also that there is a changing relationship between the content and the consumers as well? Because Ben, you've alluded to this as well, and I'm kind of, could you maybe expand on that a little bit more? What is the changing relationship between the games, the content, the creation, and the people who are buying and playing it? And how do publishers facilitate that changing relationship?
Well, yeah, I mean, so it's all about the audiences we're going after. I mean, that's really what a publisher is trying to do is go after a certain audience for a certain title, and ultimately, yeah, the consumer that we now have today is vastly different than the consumer and what kind of content and how it's delivered, when it's delivered. Thinking about like mood states. What about like knowing how someone's feeling and be able to deliver content to them based off of that. And people care about something that is more personalized to them, which AI opens up a lot of possibilities around personalization of that. And so, yeah, it's just this audience. Sorry, I have ADHD, and so I get distracted by everything. This audience is just so split and fractured across so many different things, and we are struggling to keep up with the speed at which the audiences are changing, adapting, diving into something new, and our delivery mechanisms aren't keeping up with it either. Now, is the solution cloud? Is it being able to get more direct to consumer via TV or via any device? Like, it could be many different things. We don't quite know what this next realm is, but we're in between eras right now and trying to figure out what is the look of this next era.
By the way, the people in the back, there are some seats up here in the front if anybody wants to come sit up here. Come be in my direct eye line, I dare you. Anyway, John, same question to you. What do you think is how do you think the relationship between the games and the players has changed, and as has the relationship of sort of everyone in between those two?
As the games get more, quote, intelligent, are less programmed, are less and more kind of open-ended, and that's not to say that everything changes every single time, but the opportunity is there for the game to sort of mold itself around the player and to embrace who the player is and how the player likes to play and what the player happens to be interested in, and for the player to even contribute, to the story and to the gameplay. And as that happens, that's a big deal. I think that is a thing that means that that what you think of as a game will change, and that things, like I said, one of the things we say all the time is the story is the game and the game is the story, and it's not a thing where you have a little bit of a movie and then you do some gameplay that's related to that, and then a little bit of a movie that sets up the next block of gameplay. It's the story is the game, and your interaction with those characters is the game, and there's going to be hundreds of new ideas like that. But I think that we're the player is moving inside the game. The player is moving inside your studio. They're moving inside of everything that you're doing, and whether we like that or dislike that or whatever, it's happening. And so that has to affect not just the gameplay, but how you discover it, how you play it, how you connect with others around it. All of that will be informed by the fact that these games are much more fluid, and they're going to be much more responsive to what's on the player's mind at any moment.
Just a couple more questions before we move out to you wonderful people. So if we start with the problem in publishing, what do you think the solution is? Do you have one? What do you think? What is your suggestion for how publishers can change and how they can better facilitate that changed relationship between not just publishers and developers, but publishers and consumers?
I mean, shadow publishing. There you go. No.
There you go.
No, I mean,
Heard it here first, folks.
It's new models, and we need to attempt a bunch of new types of looking at. Okay, well, financially, it's an issue. So we need models around obviously providing financing. Luckily, more traditional financing options are starting to emerge. Banks and other kind of institutions are looking to invest in games. Games are too risky right now for them to really come in hard, but they're already creating models and thinking about it. And if you have collateral, then that is an option. And so we need more around that. But then, I look at it as there's 5 levers to play with that we don't play with enough, or only certain groups play with certain levers. One is simply think of recoup. The ability to cover a cost but immediately make it back, or make it back at X percentage more on top of it. You're talking about rev share, one of the more basic ones that everyone knows about. Retainer, so that's what we do with shadow publishing. We get paid up front. That de-risks what our business is, keeps the risk on the developers, and then ultimately they keep their rights on the back end. Speaking of rights, IP rights is a lever to play with, and then ultimately equity in the studio. Now you think about a venture capital firm, they're only focused on equity in the studio for the most part. There's exceptions. You think about a publisher, they're really only focused on rev share, IP rights, and we don't think about these other two, and no one touches all five. But imagine if you did. Like, what would something like that look like? How could we set it up? And does that provide the support a developer needs and the upside that a publisher needs in a deal? Does it help reduce risk on the front end and increase the odds of success on the back end? And so we just haven't played with that model enough. And shadow publishing is just an extreme other end of it, where we don't take any rev share, we don't take any IP rights, so that I think it creates a more sustainable developer that then will want to use our services more often, because if they're keeping the rev share, they're keeping their IP rights, and they have even moderate success, they have a chance to keep the studio going. And most studios, or most success comes at game 6, 7, 8 at a studio, not game 1, but all of our systems are set up for a new studio to have a hit on game 1, and statistically that's incredibly low odds at having a success. But 7th game, like, that's when you get into the millions in revenue on average, is when you get to that level. So we just have to kind of rethink it all, and all the data's out there. Like, and that's my challenge my frustration is, we have the data, we know that you have to give a developer a certain amount of time to get to a success point, and if you do that, they are more likely to have a much greater revenue chance. Yet all of our systems don't set up that. So I think the opportunity we have is we can try these models in this moment, because the other one isn't working as well as it used to. So great time to potentially disrupt. As everyone stays the same, it's a perfect moment to do something the exact opposite. And so that's why, like, us going out with shadow publishing is really interesting. And what we found is fascinating, because we found that it's not just developers that need this, it's other publishers, it's other big entertainment companies, because they need flexible, low-cost resources per project, as they get more and more pressure. And so by creating a flexible model, suddenly we create a lot of value for these partners to be able to essentially continue to grow but not take on the overhead. And if they're not taking on the overhead, that means we're not going to have as many layoffs. So these kinds of models can benefit, but that also means we have to collaborate, we have to work together, we have to work. You're going to have multiple entities working on one project. It's not going to be really clean, all in one box, like the old school publishing model. Like, it's going to be a little bit messier, and that's where I think the role of a publisher has to evolve to be a facilitator, a connector, a broker, and bringing all those pieces together as there are more pieces to deal with.
Same question
Want
for
me
you,
to jump in
John.
there?
Yeah.
Well, I think that one model, the one that Ben's doing, is pretty interesting in that it's kind of admitting that the world is changing. So let's break this apart and let's accumulate a group of really smart people to engage with a developer to say, let's figure this out. What's unique to your to your needs and your situation. But for the bigger publishers, if I was a big old publisher that had a bit of change in my pocket, I think right now I would be thinking about the problem of discovery. And in the past, the publishers, one of the things they do is they connect you to your audience. They have relationships with the retailers and with the publications that allow the discovery methods of the day to work. And I would be thinking about what's the next generation discovery mechanism, and I would be either doing that myself or getting relationships with folks that are doing that. And like I said, I think that we're very close, maybe not more than 2 years away from AIs that have literally played every game on the planet, just like already they've read every book on the planet, and you can ask them a question about anything that's ever been written, and it's just right there. And so many, intermediaries that you used to need, just poof, they're gone, because I can just go ask them whatever I want, and literally these AIs will be playing every single game. And so I think that's going to become an important thing. It's going to be the Google moment. And I think that I would be making sure that I had, some control over that if I was a publisher, and that I was there with a solution, or at least very close to a solution, whoever comes up with that solution. And then the second thing I would be thinking about is what else does the developer need? And they're going to need access to servers, lots of them. And I would make sure that if I was a publisher, I had some unique relationship with folks that provide servers, and would make that part of kind of the turnkey solution I could offer to a developer to allow them to succeed. Allow their creativity to get out there and find an audience and make everybody some money.
Right. I think making some money is a good note to end my questions on. So I think if you all are comfortable with that, I think we can open it up to all of you wonderful people who might. Okay, we'll start over here.
Hi, guys. I've been publishing for about 20 years, and I really feel for both of you on this. And I would say that in all the interactions I've had as a publisher dealing with developers, internal or external, the biggest source of conflict and misunderstanding tends to be around brand management and messaging, understanding your positioning, understanding how you want to talk about the game. And I think it's very difficult to find that type of talent. There aren't a lot of them. They tend to have grown up in AAA, and they came from Activision or other places, right, that did it in a consumer products format. It's hard to get. That said, John, one of the best investments you can make is hire a single person who can come in, who understands brand and works with the dev team and says, let's talk about what's unique on the game. How are we going to differentiate? How are we going to sell it? How are we going to talk about it? Let that person help form the brand. You need to run your own social and community because they're your players, they're your customers. Like Ben said, it may not be the first game that works. You don't want to walk away from the 100,000, 200,000, 2 million people there, right? In the past, it used to be a retailer that owned it, or a publisher if you went with them. Now it's you. So I think if you get that one hire done and think about that, and you go to a publisher and say, look, here's our game, here's how it competes in the market, here's how we want to talk about it. What we need from you is A, B, C, D. Because Ben's right in that you do not want to be managing submissions, right? You do not want to be trying to figure out whether it's worthwhile to do Italian voice in your game, right? Or low QA. You don't want to do any of that. You also don't want to be trying to figure out who a rep is at Steam that'll care about your game, which is going to be one of 70 released that day, right? You just won't have the relationship. You won't know who to call. They won't care if you do figure out who to call. So what I've seen, especially in the past 5 or 6 years, Richard Brown and I agree on this a lot, and he's very, very sharp, is that you need to own your customer in there, and you need to be very, very clear on what you want from a publisher. When you go to, and that's why I love Ben's model. My guess is if you don't need this, this, or this, you'll get a lower price from him right up front.
Exactly. Yep.
But that's my recommendation on what the biggest thing to change in publishing is. Publishing needs to own, developers need to own their communities, which means you need to own brand and messaging, because a lot of publishers also don't have great brand people anymore, right? I'm sure Ben does, but they're hard to find, and if you can find someone that loves your game and understands it and has some traditional training, it's a great hire, and trust me, you'll be in so much better position to interact with a publisher, know what you want, and make sure you're both, you'll save time and money, right? And you'll have a better message going to market.
Well, I think what you're speaking to is the fact that publishing is a support mechanism. Like, it should absolutely be centered around the developer, their community. You build the community over time. And then a publisher can come in and help supplement where you don't have as many resources, help add fuel onto that fire and grow it. Like, that's where a publisher is best served. And publishers realize this. This is why they're waiting for a developer to build a community and then attach onto it, because it is it's so much less risky at that point, and then a publisher has the resources to really attack all the angles of it. But you have to build out some of the publishing resources centrally, not all of them, because not all of them do you need all the time. That's why having a supplemental resource is key, but having some key ones in all the time, and then treating your developer as a business that needs to continue to operate and think about the long term, not just getting to the one game. And some do it really well, but some don't ever think about the fact that they're an entrepreneur building a business, and they need to treat it like that, like anybody does outside of games. It baffles me because, being essentially a startup and get invited to entrepreneur conferences all the time that have nothing to do with games, and we never talk about somebody building a studio is an entrepreneur.
Hello? Oh.
Well, that's it, I
That
guess.
was me.
Oh,
Sorry.
was you.
That was me.
And we need to talk about the fact that they're entrepreneurs and that
There
they
we go.
need to think about the business and the long-term business. And what if you don't have a publisher doing all the business stuff for you? And we don't do that enough.
All right, do we have any? Here we go. Get me away from the thermostat. Ready? Go.
I'm really curious about the interplay between funding and your business. And I'm really interested in the interplay between funding and your business model. Like the retainer model is really interesting. I'm trying to raise funds right now, and I've been approaching publishers because I need all the things that a publisher does. If I was to approach someone that is not a publisher for funding, I would have no idea how to estimate what my cost change would be bringing you on board. At what point do you start talking to people, and do you have relationships with people who are funding things?
Part of the joy of this model is coming up with all the different ways we could work with somebody, because it depends on their situation, and then we kind of configure around it. So what we do is we do a free evaluation up front to try to understand what the project is, what the needs are, and evaluate if we can actually help and have the bandwidth to help, because there's only so many projects that we can try to help them get funding or try to connect them to somebody else. But we're very complementary, where we can work with a VC because it's great. If a developer gets funding and gives up equity in their studio, last thing you want to do is also give up rev share and IP rights. It's bad for the VC. It's bad for you. But our model's complementary to it, where we just paid, but you have to budget it. And so we built a calculator to kind of lay out and also compare, okay, by spending, $300,000, $500,000, depending on what it is, up front, here's, if your game does X, here's what you keep in your pocket and doesn't go to a publisher. And so, but, we try, we try to figure out ways to help, but ultimately it's if you're able to budget out and have that as an option, which is tough to get there, then we're an option. And even just us existing gives you leverage, because with a publisher you can be like, okay, well, I don't like this deal. I could go hire a publisher, and that gives you leverage. And that doesn't exist right now in any kind of large enough way for it to be a leverage point. But if it did, that would help you. And so I think to the funding piece, we need to be better as an industry at teaching people about publishing, about the funding mechanisms, and about what comes with that. I like to compare traditional publishing to the show Married at First Sight, where you're stuck with that person. You don't know really anything about it. You're going to get the service you want, whereas shadow publishing is dating, and it's better to date than to get married on day one, because you can see if that relationship works, and so much of it is a relationship between publisher and developer. And not everybody works well together, even with the best of intention. And I would say, having been in publishing a long time, all the publishers have good intent. The workers, the people that are in it, care about the projects that they're on. Do they always get the resourcing that they want to be able to actually support? No, because a publisher spreads their risk across a portfolio, and whichever one's trending the best up, guess what? They get the most support.
Up, down here, and then we'll move up further.
Hey, Ben, you mentioned that publishers, but I think also venture, really anybody investing in games right now is looking for traction earlier and earlier. What do you see as kind of the future of the ecosystem for studios that are trying to like build a product that they think is going to succeed and like get that traction early and then raise enough funds to actually get it out the door? Like, do you see any, I would love for you to elaborate, both of you for that matter, on that early stage game studio startup and when do you show, like, how do you show traction, and how does that leverage into conversations with investors or publishers?
So just how do I see?
Yeah, how do you see that relation or that early stage ecosystem evolving, like with shadow publishing and other kinds of mechanisms?
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't always see it being in games, but we're in a moment where even outside of games, startups are having to show traction in greater ways than traditional. So it's more so an overall economic piece of things. So could that swing back at any moment? Potentially, if interest rates change, or if some of the tariffs don't go away, or so, who knows? It could completely change that piece of things. Now, I don't think we're not going back to the old model of things. I think the reality is there's so much competition in market that you have to, like, we're managing a business that is supposed to reduce risk as much as possible, and the only way you do that is by finding things with traction that seem like they have a chance, and for a developer, how do you come into this knowing you're probably not going to get money right away, or what you're getting is less money? I think you have to segment out the build and treat it more like how a startup treats everything. You have a pre-seed round, you have a seed round, you have your Series A, you have B, C, and I think developers have to think about that. Now, will it look exactly the way that it does in other startups? I don't know, but you're not going to get all the money you need up front. If a project you think is going to be $3 million, no one is going to give you $3 million right now. But $100,000 from an angel, that's viable. Could you prove that you get to a point where, okay, look, we expect to get an audience of 10,000 people being interested on our Discord. You say that up front, you prove it, and then you have traction, and you can go to the investor. They might have said no last time, and you said, hey, look, I proved out my point. Now are you interested? And they probably will say no at that point too. Then you raise a little bit more, get more traction, say, hey, here's our next milestone, here's what we're trying to do. You get to that point, and eventually somebody might be interested enough and unlock and whatnot. But we have to go little step by little step right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon to get something off the ground.
I would concur with that. I've run research and development organizations for much of my adult life, and in that, the most important thing is that first thing where you're trying to figure out what the hell is this? What are we trying to prove? Where's the value? What's the thing that is good? And for this company, we self-funded a pretty large group of people to do just that, to figure out what is it, and so that we're not going out and trying to figure that out in presentations to investors and in presentations to even potential employees. That first thing of figure out what it is you're building and get that funded however you can before you go out to talk with people about bigger money.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll say is think about the angle you're going after. So with my company, I raised $3 million, ended up oversubscribing it to $3.32 million on my original round. But what was interesting was I struggled to get money from traditional games VCs. So I used a different angle, my regional angle. of how do we bring this industry to a new place that isn't as prominent. Where's the gap? And you know how I used that was in that slide deck when I originally pitched the second slide in that deck after Midwest Games. It was just a map, and it showed where publishers are in the United States, and the problem was very apparent that there was nothing in the middle of the country that was supporting game developers. And so by tapping into that and tapping into a Midwest pride, Midwest angle of things, I got investors that had never invested in games before interested because they wanted to see new industry, new innovation coming to the region. So find your angle. And with games, there's a lot of other types of angles if you think about it just in a very different way. And that might unlock new types of investors because you need to get somebody that believes in your cause, and they might not even understand games. But if you can come up with that angle, it might unlock money that you never expected.
I believe we had a question up here in the flower shirt. Okay. Do we have any more questions? I think we have time for about one more. Okay. Mr. Spector, you keep asking me questions, sir. Go.
Okay. Well, a commented question related to the last one. What I found when I was out looking for funding, this was a while ago, I used to be able to get a deal on the basis of a 2-page concept pitch. And now people want to see a vertical slice, basically, before they'll give you any money, which is very frustrating. Very frustrating. But the question I have is, you know, I come from a background of boxed games on a shelf, and publishers have those had those relationships that I never had. You know, I couldn't go out and publish a game if my life depended on it. Does that world have any relevance anymore, or is it just dead?
It's dead.
Okay, thank you for the short answer. Appreciate it.
Certainly not to me.
Yeah, sorry. I've said it like 5 times in the last like 3 days that if you haven't published a game in the last 2 years, you have no idea what you're doing in the current landscape of things. Not that you can't figure it out, but it is a completely different world than it was even 2.5 years ago. And you look back, and too often people are, and I get it. It's and I understand why people do it. They go back to their legacy of where they came from, what they did, what games they put out. But some of the folks, especially with how long a game takes, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, whatever it was, there was 300 games coming out on Steam a year, and yet we still today have about 300 games that succeed a year. And now we have 19,000 games that came out last year. And again, I think 25,000 are coming out this year. And there's still going to be 300 games that succeed. And so if your ability to understand the platforms and the tactics that exist today, like it is evolving every single day. And one big caution point I want to flag, and it doesn't come from ill intent from folks that post these newsletters and things that talk about, oh, Balatro succeeded, oh, this game succeeded. How did they do it? Who cares how they did it? Because you're not going to repeat that. Like it's not going to happen. 1,000 people did the same thing they did and failed, and 1,000 people after them will try to copy them and they'll fail. You have to find your distinct piece of this, and it's not just a template. And every single year that goes by, it becomes a little bit more difficult until the platforms make a change. And the big thing I hate is that Steam, being able to release a game on Steam for $100 is terrible for the industry. We have to raise the barrier. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to get a huge flow of games. And I get the argument for why we want accessibility in all of this, but it also is just a huge challenge of being able to keep up with the insane volume, many of which are not actual like full games.
I might have to cut you off there, Ben, just because. John, we have time for one answer from you. Let's have something profound.
It's a pretty cool moment to be building stuff. It's possible to do things that just were completely impossible before. You think about some amazing games that failed, 5 years ago and 10 years ago because they were trying to do things too early, and we're just on the verge of just this explosion of creativity that is, I think, really exciting.
Awesome. And on that note, I'm getting tired of people opening that door, looking at me, looking scared, and running away. So let's give John and Ben a big round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you. Great job, you guys. And we'll see all of you at 5:30 tonight.